In this video, we'll be using a series of tools to create the largest Bootstrap grid system inside of Photoshop. We'll be using the rectangle tool. We'll also be using guides in conjunction with our rulers, and we'll be using a number of layers. I'll also talk about the layers panel in much more detail in a video coming up really soon. I'm going to jump back to my browser for a second. I want to take a look at the specs I need for the large devices grid. We need a container whose full width is 1170 pixels, and we'll have 12 columns that are each 97 pixels wide, and 30 of those pixels, 15 pixels on either side, are going to be for the gutters. So let's use this math to create our grid. I'm going to open my calculator really quick here just to check that math. So 97 pixels times 12 columns is 1164 pixels. So my math isn't perfect, and the reason being is that Bootstrap is actually really using percentages. So I've got a difference of 6 pixels, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute those evenly on the left and right hand sides. So I'm going to put 3 extra pixels on the left and 3 extra pixels on the right, so the middle of our document will have the exact 1164 pixels. So let's jump into Photoshop. We'll just begin. I'm going to start with my rectangle tool, and I've got a fill with no stroke. If you've got a fill that's different than mine, it's probably black and white. If you want to reset your default colors, go ahead and click the D key, and that sets your default colors to black and white. And you can see my fill is now black. I'm just gonna, with my rectangle tool selected, I'm gonna click out on my stage with my rectangle tool, and my create rectangle dialog box is going to show up. Now what I'm doing here is I actually want to create that 1170 pixel wide page in the middle of my document, and I want to frame it in with some guides. So I really don't care what the height of this is. My main concern is the width, and so I'm going to enter this in manually, 1170. And what this is going to allow us to do is snap some guides to the shape, and it saves us from having to drag guides out and try to be pixel perfect with that, because more often than not you're going to be off by 0.1 or 0.2 pixels. This way we're going to get perfect math. So let's just click OK, and here's my rectangle. You can see that that showed up in my layers panel, but I can see that it's not quite centered, so I want to center that. Let's select our move tool, which is the top tool in your toolbar. You can also select this tool by pushing your keyboard shortcut, which is the letter V. And now I need to center this inside of my artboard. And in order to do that, I need to make a selection, and we'll cover selections in much more detail towards the end of the course. There's a couple different ways to do this. Under the select menu, you can select all. I like to just use my keyboard shortcut, which is Command A or Control A on a Windows machine. And you can see what happened was I got what's called the marching ants, and this made a selection around my entire document. I don't know if you noticed what else happened is that my alignment tools actually showed up in my top bar here. So I can actually align this shape, as long as it's selected in my layers panel, to my selection. This second last alignment tool here, which is align horizontal centers, go ahead and click that and watch how my bar just kind of shifts over to the left. There, so now I know that my rectangle is perfectly centered inside of my artboard. I can go ahead and deselect this selection. So the keyboard shortcut for that is Command D or Control D on a Windows machine, or go up to the menu option where it says select and click deselect, and that disappears. So make sure that you keep this layer selected, because what that allows your rulers to do, or your guides to do, is actually snap to that shape. So hover over top of your vertical rulers here and click and hold and drag, and you'll see a guide come out, and it'll snap right to the edge of that shape there. So you can see I'm right at 100 pixels, which is exactly what I wanted. If you recall, I said I wanted 100 pixels on the left and 100 pixels on the right of this, so that if there's any sort of color or image into the background, we can go ahead and we can see that. So there's my first guide, and I'll go ahead and I'll drag my second guide out. There we go. And it's at this point that I actually don't even need this shape anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to drag this shape down to the little trash can here. This is going to delete that layer. So there it goes. Let's continue with this process. Remember that on each side of each gutter we've got 15 pixels, but we have those 6 extra pixels that we need to distribute on the left and right hand side to get that 1164 pixels right in the middle. So we're going to repeat that process again with the rectangle tool. Go ahead and select it. Come out onto your stage and just click to get your rectangle dialog box. Again, I don't care about the height. I'm just concerned about the width. And remember, 15 pixels is the size of the gutters on the left and right hand side, making a total of 30. But because we're only dealing with one side at a time, we'll use 15. We need to divide those extra 6 pixels in half, so there's 3. 3 plus 15 is 18. So that's my new width for this rectangle, 18 pixels. Now, what I need to do is select my Move tool, or my keyboard shortcut, which is the letter V. And I can click anywhere. I don't have to necessarily click right on the shape. As long as I've got the layer selected, I'm going to click and I'm going to drag it, and as soon as it approaches that guide, it snaps right to it, and that's what I want. Now I can click and hold and drag a new guide out right on the opposite side there. So 1118 pixels, it's perfect. Now I need to reciprocate that over on the right hand side. So again, as long as you've got that layer selected and you've got your Move tool selected, go ahead and click, and I'm going to hold Shift so that it constrains it to a perfect horizontal slide. Let go, and I'll drag out my next guide right there. So now I've got 18 pixels over here and 18 pixels over here. Again, I don't need the shape anymore, so I'm just going to click and drag it down to the trash can. All right, now here comes the great part. We're going to make Photoshop do most of the work for us. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create the column, the inner parts of the columns, and I'm going to let Photoshop handle the math, doing the math for all of the gutters. I know that they need to be 30 pixels in between. Let me jump back to the browser, and the entire column needs to be 97. So if I subtract 30 from the 97, I'm left with 67. So I'm going to create those, and I'm going to let Photoshop handle this. Jump back to Photoshop really quick. Let's grab our rectangle tool, and we'll create the inner parts of those gutters. So I'm going to click once, and the width, remember, it needs to be 67. It's the 97 minus the 30, so 67. And click OK. Select my Move tool, and I just want to butt it right up against that innermost guide right here on the left hand side. Now what I want to do is I want to make a whole bunch of copies of these, and I'm going to do this over here in the Layers panel as opposed to drawing several of these. All you have to do is click and hold on this layer and drag it down to that second icon at the bottom, which looks like the page with the bottom left corner folded over. That's your Create New Layer. But if you drag an existing layer on top of that, it makes a copy for you. So you don't see anything really happen on the stage, but in reality what's happening is that you've got two rectangles in the exact same spot, one right on top of the other. You can see that my first one is called Rectangle 1, my next one is called Rectangle 1 Copy. So I've really got two. With Rectangle 1 Copy selected, I'm going to hold Shift and click on the bottom one to select both of them. And now I'm actually going to click and drag both of these down. So now I've got 4. What I want in the end is 12, because remember, we've got a 12 column system here, and we're going to let Photoshop distribute them and create all our gutters for us. So I'm going to click on that top one, Rectangle 1 Copy 3, and I'm going to hold Shift and I'm going to click on Rectangle 1. That will select everything in between as well. So there's 4. If I click and drag this down to the Create New Layers, I'm going to get 4 more, so that's 8. And I need 4 more, so I'll just do that one more time. And there, Rectangle 1 Copy 11 actually tells me I've got 12 because this one isn't a copy of itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this top one, and I want to actually move it to the other side. So with my Move tool selected, I'm going to hold Shift key. That way it'll constrain it to a perfectly horizontal move, and click and drag that shape over to the right hand side. Now it might not look perfect, but that's just because we're not working at 100%. Now this is where the magic happens. Select Rectangle 1 Copy 11 and hold Shift and click on Rectangle 1 to select all of the layers. And this little button right here called Distribute Horizontal Centers, that's what you want to click on, and then watch what happens to all of your layers. You've got perfect spaces, and these are perfect 30 pixel spaces in between the 67 pixel columns. So leave all these layers selected, and now it's just a matter of clicking and dragging guides out into each one of these little spaces. And thanks to the power of video editing, I am finished. So I no longer need these layers. I'm actually just going to click and drag them down to the trash can and delete them. And here's our grid system. So what we'll do in the next movie is we'll set up the medium grid system.